Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Friday, the 9th of February, 2018. Or if you prefer, I believe it's day 1886. Frack free in the UK since the moratorium was lifted on Thursday, not Friday, Thursday, the 13th of December 2012. And I should, of course, remembered that it was the Thursday the 13th, because the following day, Friday the 14th, was the day of the Sandy Hook events in the United States. Not that there's any relationship between the two, but just two very memorable dates that should have been indelibly printed on my brain. Anyway, day 1886. And I'm back here in the southwest of England and have been here for a week catching up on some other stuff and some research. And it's a wonderful morning. All the clouds are natural this morning. It's a beautiful sunrise and the bird song is just glorious. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to enjoy this natural environment. And of course, long may that continue. Now, I shall be heading back up to Misson Springs over the weekend to start the next phase of the development of the camp at Misson Springs. And at the moment, the camp does not have any external source of funding. So if you would like to help us continue with the development of the camp at Misson Springs, then please go to frackingnightmare.com, and if you can make a small donation on the top left-hand side of the page there, it will be greatly appreciated. But whilst you're there, whilst you're on frackingnightmare.com, please take the opportunity to download, the only download on that website, which is the wonderful yet disturbing spreadsheet that is the life's work of Dr. Theo Colborn, who really spent the last 15 years of her life trying to establish exactly what chemicals were used by the unconventional gas and oil industry in the United States. And it's a very disturbing list of some, I believe, 960 odd chemicals. But it's not just the list of the chemicals, it is the role they play in the actual frack operation and the harm they cause to the ecology, to the health of livestock, to the health of people. And it's a very, very informative download. Now, to date, it's been downloaded by just over 13,300 people across the world. But this is a spreadsheet that everybody who is aware and concerned about the magnitude of the threat from the unconventional gas industry in the UK should download and peruse at their leisure. And of course, it will very quickly explain why it is that the industry is so reluctant to be transparent about the chemicals that it does use, preferring instead to say, yeah, well, we're not using anything that you probably wouldn't find under your sink. Well, it might be under your sink, but you wouldn't want it in your kettle. So do please take that opportunity to take that download. Now, the price of oil is continuing to drop. It's literally just over 60 bucks a barrel right now at $60.63. And this, of course, is very much controlled by OPEC. And the Saudi analysts are keeping very, very close tabs on the financial health and well-being of the unconventional gas industry in the US. And they have pretty much determined that 65 bucks a barrel is the break-even point for the unconventional gas industry in the United States. So they'll keep it below 65 bucks. And I think it's going to hover around about 60 bucks for quite some time. In the UK, of course, it's at least 75 bucks a barrel and probably more. And we'll see why it probably should be more in just a second. But the measure of whether or not the mug punters in the UK actually think that the unconventional gas industry has a future is really the iGas measure. And of course, 4 years ago, the iGas stock was £1.60. And today, if we look at a direct comparison, it's wallowing at just over 4 pence. So basically, it's about 3% of the value of what it was 4 years ago. So those people who bought in any time around January 2014 have actually away some 97% of their investment. And despite the fact that I and many others were encouraging them to ditch the stock back in 2014 because they were literally putting their life savings at risk, but nonetheless, of course, they believed the IGAS BS of this time next year you'll be millionaires. Well, David Leningast tried that as well, and he's gone. And Andrew Austin, the former chief executive of IGAS, he's gone, been replaced by the Stephen E. Bowler. Appropriate name, huh? And you know, basically the mug punters who get drawn into this are convinced by their slick salesmen working on their behalf to push the stock, working on a 30% commission. And unfortunately, the reality is that the vast majority of punters who pump their money into IGAS are not going to be millionaires. They're going to be very, very disappointed, frustrated, and poor. So if you are an investor in IGAS and you're watching this, which I doubt, but nonetheless, if you are an investor, take my counsel. Get out now. Because although it appears that it's in good shape at 81 pence, of course, what IGAS probably won't tell you is that they refloated on the basis of 20 for 1 to make the stock look more attractive. So if you do the exact conversion, then the stock was somewhere around about £30 4 years ago, and now it's less than £1. So, you know, there you have it. So get out whilst the going is, well, I wouldn't say good, but better than it's going to be in the future. Now, this morning, I just want to touch on the Oil and Gas Authority. And the title of this morning's video is The Oil and Gas Authority, a criminal cabal participating in the destruction of the UK. Now, my thanks again to the outstanding research of Benjamin Dean in Cheshire. But let me just read this paragraph from the website of the Oil and Gas Authority. And it says, this is on the page of what we do. This is the Oil and Gas Authority, what we do. And this was updated on the 19th of October of last year. And it says the Oil and Gas Authority's role is to regulate, influence and promote the UK oil and gas industry in order to maximise the economic recovery of the UK's oil and gas resources. We seek to be progressive and highly effective authority, doing all we can to attract investment and with that jobs, helping to anchor valuable skills and expertise in this country. Created as one of the key recommendations of Sir Ian Wood's 2014 review of the UKCS, the OGA, the Oil and Gas Authority, became an executive agency on the 1st of April 2015, which created operational independence from DEC, now the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, to the fullest extent possible within the established boundaries, and gave us direct accountability for exploration and development decisions and approvals. Bullshit. On the 1st of October 2016, we became a government company limited by shares under the Companies Act of 2006, with the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy being the sole shareholder. That would be you, Greg Clark. The OGA is largely funded by an industry levy introduced on October the 1st, 2015, headquartered in Aberdeen with another office in London. Headquartered in Aberdeen, nice and cosier. Get a lot of lunches bought for you by those players who need you to do what is in their best interests. Yet, the Secretary of State cannot delegate accountability. That's why it makes you gag when it says that they have the accountability. They do not. The responsibility and accountability of the Secretary of State is to do what is required on behalf of the Crown, because hydrocarbons in this country are Crown resources. Unfortunately, you know, we do not have split estate. In other words, the landowner basically owns the land, the surface, but the Crown owns the resources beneath that land. And the Secretary of State, operating on behalf and accountable to the Crown, cannot delegate that accountability, which is why it states that the sole shareholder of this private limited company is the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Now, that would be Greg Clark. Now, what Ben Dean has uncovered is that back in 2014, the Oil and Gas Authority effectively gifted Third Energy the opportunity to continue to operate within the petroleum license 080, and that they could continue operating there, paying a license fee of just £10,890 in total. Whereas in reality, when that license came up for renewal in 2014, it should have been adjusted to the going market rate of £1,200 per square kilometre. Now, the Third Energy licence is 99 square kilometres, so Third Energy should have been paying £118,800, £118,800 as an annual licence fee for certainly the past 4 years. But the Oil and Gas Authority, operating effectively in complete autonomy, without apparent reference to the Secretary of State, because if they did refer it to the Secretary of State at the time, then they would have effectively not been, or the Secretary of State would not have been operating within his terms of reference as the person responsible and accountable to the Crown. He would not have been getting the best deal. But of course, the OGA decided that basically, yeah, Third Energy, you can carry on paying a fraction of what you should be paying, because we know damn well that if we charge you £118,800 on an annual basis, with revenues of little over £400,000, basically, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Well, Third Energy are in a world of hurt anyway, for so many reasons. And of course, over the last few days, then Third Energy have put out a public announcement that they're going to seek planning permission to extend the life of their pipeline network in North Yorkshire. And the reason they're doing this is because of the threat of an injunction being served upon them by Frack Free Rydale. And you know, these two examples show the magnitude of the creativity and concern that exists within communities all around the country who are determined to uncover the malfeasance of the Secretary of State, of the Oil and Gas Authority, and of the companies themselves. So this is getting very interesting, and in fact there is more on the Oil and Gas Authority, and next week we'll be looking at some of the other decisions that the Oil and Gas Authority have taken, which are solely in the interests of the industry that they are supposed to regulate. So the Oil and Gas Authority is effectively an integral component of the criminal cabal that is intent on destroying large tracts of this country in return for what? Energy security? No. Because the government themselves have acknowledged that the exploitation of unconventional hydrocarbons will not in any way, shape or form have a major impact on the energy security of this country. But of course, greater concern should be our food security. Because last week it was reported that the UK is at the top of the league for eating junk food, processed foods. Over 50% of foods purchased in the UK are processed. It's junk. It's got you know, very little in the way of nutrition. In fact, in some cases, the packaging probably has more nutrition than the actual food itself. So we're losing the skill of producing and then cooking natural foods. But nonetheless, we are importing in this country 50% of our food. So surely a greater concern should be the food security of the UK. And yet 1.2 million acres is licensed to INEOS, and currently, you know, nearly 20% of the country is licensed for unconventional gas exploitation. And that will devastate the agricultural landscape right across the north of England, and potentially, of course, tracks across the south of England as well. And yet, are people concerned about this? No, that's what they're relying on. Because the supposed democracy of this country relies on the apathy of the general population. And fortunately, that apathy is starting to dissipate as people realise the magnitude of the threat to their communities. And that's borne out by yet another packed house at the INEOS expose events that are being held around Yorkshire at the moment. And last night at Westow Cricket Club, there were literally people lining up outside the doors trying to hear the detail of the presentation. And that tour continues. Tonight, Andy Georgiou of Food and Water Watch will be continuing his expose of INEOS and their outrageously cavalier attitude to everything except profit. Because INEOS is a classic company, a private company, reportedly some 60% of which is owned by Jim Ratcliffe, but a private company that is simply motivated by greed. Greed, greed, and more greed. And of course, the primary purpose of them exploiting hydrocarbons, or unconventional hydrocarbons in the UK, will be to reduce the cost of their feedstock, to reduce the cost of production, primarily of plastics. So every which way, this is something that you know, should be shut down, because the bottom line is the only thing the communities are going to benefit from is the increased risk to their health. And as we've seen in areas around the US and in particularly in Queensland, the increase in pressure that is put on the healthcare system as a result of this industry rolling into town is enormous. So tonight the INEOS tour goes to Norton in North Yorkshire, just off the A64, and that's at St Peter's Church Hall. Postcode is YO179AE, and that's kicking off at 7 o'clock. But if you want to guarantee a seat, then I would strongly advise you to get there early. Now on Sunday, the tour goes to Helmsley, and right in the centre of Helmsley at the Market Square, the Feathers Hotel, and again 7 o'clock. Now I know that the Helmsley event is going to be very popular, so once again, if you want to guarantee a seat, then get there early. And then next week, the tour moves to Sledmere, just near Driffield in East Yorkshire, and then on Wednesday to Pickering, but I'll be discussing the detail of that next week. Meanwhile, as we pointed out yesterday, Third Energy, or as they pointed out themselves in their accounts, Third Energy is effectively a wholly owned subsidiary of Barclays Bank. And the pressure really needs to be mounted on Barclays Bank, and of course ultimately on any of the institutions that are financing this insidious industry. And Barclays Bank not only hold 97% of Third Energy, that they also hold a significant chunk of the financing provided to INEOS. So Barclays Bank, which of course built its, the Barclays brothers built their fortunes on the back of the slave trade. So, you know, once again, proof that the financial institutions lack any kind of moral compass. But that continues with their financing of unconventional gas exploitation in the UK. So this weekend, please use whatever creativity you can bring to bear to raise awareness to Barclays customers about the threat that their bank is bringing to this country, particularly across the north of England. So please, make sure that the staff in Barclays understand your concern, not just the staff behind the counter, but the management of the branches, who probably know nothing about this at all, so they need to be educated. And obviously raise the awareness in the high street, because all of the Barclays banks are in very high footfall areas. So it's a great opportunity to raise the wider awareness about Barclays' involvement in this insidious industry. And of course, if you are a Barclays customer, please get onto their call centres and don't just talk to, the person on the end of the phone. Ask to speak to a supervisor or a manager, and make it very clear that you are extremely unhappy about Barclays' participation in this industry, and that unless they do something about it, you're going to, close your accounts, or maybe close them anyway and go somewhere else. And those companies that are with Barclays, then, maybe consider, if you are with Barclays or you work with a company that's with Barclays, then consider maybe moving to somewhere like Tridios, an ethical bank that's not going to put money into an industry that is going to destroy this country. So fortunately, what we are seeing, as we saw in Derbyshire earlier in the week, is communities coming together. And this is so important. You're always going to get some clown who tells you that, you need them to save you from this industry. No, you don't. You don't need anyone. All we need to be doing is encouraging people to do their own research, for communities to come together, to develop their own strategy. For sure, they can take account of what has been done elsewhere, but ultimately it's their community. They know the landscape of their community. They know the way things operate within their community. They know the Achilles heel that will shut this industry down within their communities, as we've seen in Ellesmere Port, in Lancashire, of course, with their decision to reject Quadrilla's latest submission for a traffic management plan to go back to Rossiter, as we've seen with Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council, and then more recently, earlier this week, with Derbyshire County Council. So this is about communities, and this is the fastest growing social movement that this country has ever seen. And because it has no structure, there's no NGO. We get support for sure from the likes of Friends of the Earth, but the bottom line is it's community by community, and neither the government, certainly not the OGA, or the industry has any way in which they can deal with it, because they just don't know what's coming next. And Third Energy, I can assure you that once you've dealt with the pipeline issue, then there are other challenges being held in the wings just to make sure that you are never able to get your bits back in the ground in any way, shape or form, whilst you are intent on fracking anywhere in this country. So have a great weekend. I'm going to have a break. I'm going to go back up to the north of England, and I shall be back with you on Monday morning at 8:30 from Misston Springs. So have a great weekend, and don't forget, go tag a Barclays. Take care. See you next week.